So, for those of you that don't know, I am in Iceland right now. I am playing the Reykjavik Open and actually just finished round one. And I'd like to do a recap video, the start of a new series. And I do know I still owe you guys one more recap from Gibraltar, but because I'll be focusing on the Reykjavik tournament for the next week or so, I'll be doing recap videos when I do have the time. And I actually want to start this video by sharing some photos because I've been in Iceland for the last 5 or 6 days, and I've been doing some kind of touristy things and trying to adjust to the weather, the time zone, and the horses. So a few days ago, I had the pleasure of riding an Icelandic horse. Figured this would be good preparation of reviewing how the horsey moves and also visited Bobby Fischer's grave. Bobby Fischer is buried in a small town in Selfoss, Iceland, and I actually visited in 2016, but returned to pay some respects. And then I played chess with a goat. Now, this isn't the goat you would imagine. Usually, when we think of chess goat, we think of Fischer, Carlsen, or Kasparov, but this was a real goat. It tried eating the chess pieces, but thankfully I was able to hold on to all of my pieces. And then I saw the Northern Lights, which was really cool. This picture I took with a 25-second exposure, so this wasn't quite what it looked like in real life. But when you allow a lot of light to come into the camera, it can really accentuate the lights, and it was definitely a bucket list item to check off. So let's get into the game. I was paired in round one against another player from the USA, Ryan Murphy, who I do know actually. He's from Wisconsin, and last time I saw him was in St. Louis. He was visiting. I actually took a photo of him a few years ago in 2018. It was actually at a after party featuring a lot of strong grandmasters. And imagine a lot of people recognize some of the grandmasters in this photo, but my opponent was the guy right here. I'm trying to use my cursor, but it's not capturing my cursor. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm playing Ryan Murphy, who has been in very close contact with Caro and Fabiano and a few other grandmasters. And yeah, I did a little bit of preparation for the game, and I found his old chess.com account, and I knew to expect a Caro Kann, which did happen after e4 and c6. And it took me a little bit of time to decide what to play because I could have gone for London or English or Ready, but I figured I would test him in his main opening, and I went for a sideline, pawn d3, which I've played a few times before. I played against Sagar Shah in the Speed Chess Championship match. Also played maybe once or twice against Levy in the same event. And d3 kind of signifies that white's going for a King's Indian attack setup with knight d2, g3, bishop g2, knight f3. And this is basically what happened after d5, knight d2. Ryan chose a pretty solid line, g6, and I go for, yeah, basic King's Indian attack, g3, pawn e5, bishop g2, knight e7, castling, castling. We both played the moves pretty quickly in the opening, and this isn't the most confrontational opening, but I decided to go for this because it's a position that just has a lot of life, and it's not something that liquidates too quickly. And I actually had this position on my computer screen about half hour before the round began, and I prepared the move pawn a4. Now, the main line here is rook to e1, which is an attempt to kind of pressure the e-file, threatening to take and then win a pawn. But after pawn d4, black scores pretty well here, and pawn a4 is a bit more flexible of a move, because there's cases where I want to keep my rook on f1 in the event that black plays d4. I can go for knight c4 and then later pawn f4 ideas. So after I played a4, Ryan took kind of the first think of the game and ultimately decided to play a5, which is a very flexible move. And I played c3, still trying to stay flexible. And here, the main move for black is to play knight a6, which intends to go for knight c5. And if black went for this, then I'd probably just play solidly queen c2, then decide whether to put the rook on e1 or d1. But instead, in the game, Ryan played pawn h6, which was kind of a waiting move. I think in hindsight, this move was a little bit slow, even though the intention is to prevent knight g5 and to prepare bishop d6. We're going to see that white gets some somewhat quick initiative. After rook e1, I am threatening to take on d5 and win the e-pawn, so black has to do something about it. Played rook e8, and now I keep initiative. I take on d5, take, and knight c4. So now I have 3 attackers against the pawn, and black is put into some kind of decision moment how to defend the pawn. And there are a few moves here. Now black doesn't really want to play f6. This is just being really mean to the bishop on g7. After f6, I would have d4, which would be quite nice for white. During the game, I was expecting bishop g4, which I think was the better choice, just pinning the knight, and if h3, black can trade, and if queen takes, there's knight d7, and I was expecting to go into something like this. Now, maybe not knight d7 right away, because I do have knight d6 here, but a move like queen c7, and the game would go on. Instead, black played knight d7 here, and as we're going to see, the bishop just got stuck on c8, and I was still happy to go for the move d4. And because white has a slight lean development, it makes sense for me to try and open the position. So after takes, we traded rooks, takes, and I recapture on d4. And here the pawn structure is almost completely symmetrical. If I had a pawn on h3, it would be exactly symmetrical. But there are a few kind of imbalances. My knights are a little bit more active, and because the queen is on e8, I do have ideas of knight to d6 to try and get the bishop pair. And yeah, here Ryan took a bit of a think and decided to play knight f6. During the game, I was thinking like knight e5 or knight c5 or even knight b6. These are all possible moves. But after knight f6, I realized that I can just kind of calmly complete development. Now, it's not easy to find a good square for my bishop because the knight's controlling e3 and f4, and I can't develop to g5, obviously. But I played the move bishop d2, and it was actually pretty simple plan for white, is to go for queen b3 and then rook to e1 to control the e-file. Now, I should note I can't play queen b3 right away because after queen to e1, I'd be in some trouble. Bishop f1 is met with bishop to h3. So bishop d2 was the precise move order. And yeah, we reached a position where it just wasn't easy to find a clear plan for black. Because if black tries to play a similar move, I can start targeting the undefended b7 pawn with a move like queen b3, and then having ideas of knight d6 to follow, along with rook e1. And black is clearly under a lot of pressure here. So instead, Ryan played a bit creatively and went for the move queen f8, getting off the e-file, defending the pawn another time. After I played queen b3, pawn h5 was played. And now it's clear that black has ideas of either playing pawn h4 or bishop to h6. And at first, during the game, I thought this was a creative idea to maybe try and trade a little bit, try and weaken my kingside in some way. But the more I thought here, the more I realized I can kind of just ignore what black is trying to do and carry through with my own ideas. And I started with the move rook e1, just controlling the open e-file. And after pawn h4, I just continue to ignore black's play on the kingside and play the move knight to e5, just improving the knight. And now the development for white is just really nice. The knights are well defended in the center. A bishop is pressuring d5 along with the queen, and the queen is aligned with the king, so there's some x-ray vision against the king on g8. For example, if the knight ever moves, if we play just a dumb move, knight c7, then I'd have knight takes g6 because of the pin on f pawn. So in some sense, the knight is pinned along the diagonal, and we're going to see that black gets a little bit paralyzed in just a few moves. Now bishop h6 was played, which is an interesting attempt to trade bishops. And if I knew that black was going to go for a bishop trade a few moves earlier, I would have been happy to basically trade off my worst place piece in the position, the bishop on d2. But then I realized here that this bishop isn't so useful for black either. And the general rule is that when you're controlling more space and more center, you should avoid trades of minor pieces just because you want to put the opponent in a more cramped position. And I decided here to play the move pawn f4, just avoiding trades entirely and also reinforcing the knight. And even though pawn f4 maybe looks a little bit weakening at first, moving a pawn in front of my king, there's no real way for black to exploit the king in this position. And this kind of induced black to go for the move queen c5, which looks active at first, pinning my knight, but it just invited the move bishop to e3, which I was very happy to play, aligning with the queen. And now the queen is just regretting its life decisions. And I should point out here, the knight on d5 is pinned to the pawn on f7. So black has no time to take on e3 because this is just getting mated. Knight takes g6 would be checkmate. So what black had to do here is just retreat the queen all the way back to f8. Now, there was a funny line I was thinking of during the game. It looks like black can try the move knight g4, just to try and muddy the waters, have two attackers against the bishop. But this would walk into a really, really nice tactic, knight to e6, attacking the queen twice. So basically double check against the queen. Now this move also obstructs the bishop from defending the knight on g4. And this is relevant because after a move like queen to d6, I can happily take the knight. After it takes, take the bishop on h6, and white is just up a piece at the end of this line. And when I was calculating these variations during the game, I was just getting really excited, thinking that my experience from a few days ago of riding the Icelandic horse would be very nice to include in the thumbnail photo, because the knight on e6 is a very majestic creature, almost as majestic as an Icelandic horse. But sadly, this didn't happen in the game. After bishop e3, queen f8 was played, and I decided to reposition the bishop on f2, where black can't trade it off. And now the bishop is just really nicely placed, keeps my king safe. And after pawn h3, bishop f3, the bishop now restricts any piece from coming to g4, so there's no knight g4, there's no bishop g4. And I was thinking during the game that black is just really close to being completely paralyzed. It's almost zugzwang in this position. Very difficult to find a move for black, just because the knight is still essentially pinned along the diagonal. If knight ever moves, there's still knight takes g6. The bishop is completely locked out. This knight is tied down to defending the knight on d5. The bishop is tied down to defending the pawn on b7. And if the rook tries to move to b8 to over-defend the pawn, then I have the move knight takes c6, and I'm exploiting the pin on the b file. So what ended up happening was queen d6 was played, which looks like a logical, somewhat active move. But the problem with this move is it walks into some tactics because it leaves f7 undefended, and I have the very explosive move here on c4. And it turns out that black is losing material by force. And to my surprise, Ryan actually resigned in this position, just didn't play on. I should also note that he had less than a minute left when he did resign. He was getting into some very serious time trouble. This is move 24, so it's still somewhat early in the game. But to explain why c4 is just so deadly is if the knight moves, there's actually probably a few tactics that win for white, but I was planning knight takes f7, exploiting the fact that after king takes f7, there's pawn c5 with the discovered check, and white is just winning the queen here. And basically, wherever the knight moves, I'm going to have the same tactic. Like if knight c7, again, I can take on f7. And I haven't checked this game yet with the engine. I've actually been doing this whole recap with the engine turned off. So I'm just going to verify real quick that, yeah, after pawn c4, this is completely winning for white. And all the top engine moves are not moving the knight, like bishop g7's not move. And yeah, in any case, white's winning a lot of material, and yeah, resigning, I guess, was justified for black. So overall, I was pretty happy with the game. I think it was a pretty clean game on my part, and afterwards, I wasn't entirely sure what the crucial mistake was from Black's perspective. It may have been earlier in the middle game, perhaps allowing this line, allowing takes and knight c4. Maybe Black is already under a little bit of pressure. I think during the game, I thought Black should really get the knight to c5 as quickly as possible. But yeah, overall, I have no complaints about this game. It was a nice positional build-up, and I hope there's a thing or two that viewers can learn from this game. And it was from an opening that I don't really play too often. It was a King's Indian attack against a Caro Kann. But maybe after this game, I'll have to play this opening more often if it works as well. So that just about does it. If you want to follow the broadcast of the tournament, I will leave links in the description. This was played on a DGT board, so the game was broadcast live, and there's a live commentary from the official tournament, which I will also link below. So yeah, I'm going to end it here. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more recaps